The alarm clock's shrill beep jolted Daniel Lawson awake, pulling him from a dream where he'd been floating peacefully among the stars. Ironic, considering today marked his first day teaching at the Galactic Cultural Exchange Academy. With a groan, he rolled out of bed and stumbled toward the kitchen of his small apartment, specially designed for human habitation within the massive space station that orbited Earth. "Coffee," he mumbled to himself. "Need coffee." The apartment had been equipped with Earth amenities, a thoughtful touch from the Academy administration. Daniel measured coffee grounds into the machine, filled the reservoir with water, and pressed the brew button. As the machine gurgled to life, he leaned against the counter and stared out the viewport at the blue-green sphere of Earth below. 6 months ago, he'd been an ordinary high school history teacher in Chicago. Then the Galactic Alliance had established formal diplomatic relations with Earth. And suddenly, there was a need for human educators who could help alien species understand human culture, history, and biology. The pay was incredible enough to clear his student loans in just 2 years, and the adventure was irresistible. The coffee maker beeped. Daniel poured the steaming liquid into his favorite mug, emblazoned with "Teachers change the world one student at a time." He took a long sip, feeling the caffeine begin to work its magic on his sleepy brain. 45 minutes later, showered and dressed in what the orientation packet had described as professional human attire, Daniel stood outside his classroom door. His heart hammered in his chest. He'd spent weeks preparing for this moment, studying the species profiles of his students, adapting his teaching methods to accommodate their various learning styles and physiological needs. "You can do this," he whispered to himself, clutching his travel mug of coffee. "They're just teenagers, with tentacles and exoskeletons and telepathic abilities." Daniel took a deep breath and pressed his palm against the door scanner. It slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a classroom unlike any he'd taught in before. Instead of uniform desks, the room contained a variety of seating arrangements: water tanks for the aquatic species, anti-gravity pods for those from low-gravity worlds, and more conventional desks for humanoid students. 15 pairs of eyes, some compound, some with vertical pupils, some glowing, turned to look at him. "Good morning," Daniel said, his voice steady despite his nerves. "I'm Professor Lawson, and I'll be your human studies instructor this semester." A ripple of movement passed through the classroom as students adjusted posture or activated translation devices. Daniel walked to his desk, set down his materials, and took another sip of coffee. A high-pitched squeal erupted from the front row, startling him so badly he nearly dropped his mug. "Teacher! Teacher!" A slender, insect-like creature with iridescent green exoskeleton and 4 arms leaped up from its seat. Its large, faceted eyes bulged in what Daniel recognized as the Zalaxian expression of extreme alarm. "You're consuming liquid fire." The alien gasped, mandibles quivering in distress. Daniel blinked, confused for a moment before understanding dawned. He looked down at the steaming mug in his hand. "It's just hot coffee," he explained with a reassuring smile. The Zalaxian student Zix, according to Daniel's class roster, buzzed agitatedly. But it's producing vapor. Your species willingly ingests boiling substances. Is this some form of ritualistic pain endurance?" The classroom erupted in a mix of chirps, clicks, and translated murmurs of fascination and horror. Daniel held up a hand, and the students quieted, their attention focused intensely on him and his mug. "This is actually a perfect teaching moment," Daniel said, setting his mug down on the desk. "Human Biology Lesson 1. Our species has different heat tolerances than many of yours. What feels pleasantly warm to us might be dangerously hot to you. Coffee is a traditional human morning beverage, served hot but not boiling. The temperature is about 160 degrees Fahrenheit or 71 degrees Celsius. But we observed your world's oceans, called out a blue-skinned Aquarian from her water tank. They're much cooler than that. Wouldn't such temperatures damage your internal tissues? Excellent question, Daniel nodded appreciatively. Humans are remarkably adaptable. Our mouths and digestive systems can handle a range of temperatures that would be uncomfortable or even harmful to our external skin. We've evolved to enjoy warm and hot foods and beverages. Zix was still standing, mandibles working nervously. Professor, with respect, I must insist on scanning this substance. My species serves as safety officers throughout the galaxy, and our natural sensors can detect toxins and harmful compounds. Daniel hesitated only briefly before nodding. Certainly, Zix. Just be careful not to touch it while it won't harm me. It might burn you. The Zalaxian approached cautiously, extending a specialized appendage that Daniel recognized from his preparation materials as a chemosensory organ. Zix held it several centimeters above the coffee, then jerked back. Caffeine, theobromine, numerous alkaloids, and Zix's translation device searched for appropriate terms. Plant-derived compounds with psychoactive properties. Professor, this is a drug. The classroom erupted again, this time with sounds that Daniel's translation device interpreted as expressions of shock, fascination, and in a few cases, newfound respect. Technically, yes, Daniel admitted. Caffeine is a mild stimulant that helps humans feel more alert and focused. Many Earth cultures have been consuming it for centuries. It's perfectly legal and generally safe in moderate amounts. A tall, willowy being with pale blue skin and hair that seemed to float in an invisible current raised a seven-fingered hand. Does this mean humans require chemical stimulation to function optimally in the morning? Daniel chuckled. Not require exactly, but many of us do prefer it. Human circadian rhythms, our natural sleep-wake cycles, can be affected by work schedules, stress, and other factors. Coffee helps us adjust. Is this why the orientation materials advised us not to schedule important negotiations with humans before their local time of 9 a.m.? Asked a crystalline entity from the back row, its voice tinkling like wind chimes. Probably, Daniel nodded. It's part of understanding cultural and biological differences. Just as I wouldn't expect a crystalline like yourself to make decisions during your hibernation phase, or ask a Zalaxian to work during molting season. The class seemed to relax slightly at this explanation, though Zix remained standing, eyeing the coffee with suspicious fascination. May I observe you consuming more of this substance? Zix asked hesitantly. For scientific documentation. Daniel smiled and picked up the mug. Of course. He took a deliberate sip, aware of the entire class watching intently. Several students made recording gestures or activated devices to capture the moment. Notice that I blow on it first, Daniel explained after swallowing. That cools it slightly for more comfortable consumption. The vapor you see is just water evaporating, not actual fire or dangerous gas. Zix finally returned to his seat, though his eyes remained fixed on the coffee mug. Our preliminary research indicated humans were resilient, but consuming heated chemical compounds for pleasure is unexpected. That's why cultural exchange is so important, Daniel said. Reading about a species is one thing. Understanding their daily habits and biological adaptations is another, which brings us to today's lesson, human basic physiology and cultural adaptations. He activated the classroom's holographic display, showing a rotating 3D image of a human body. Let's start with temperature regulation. Humans are endotherms. We maintain a consistent internal temperature of approximately 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, or 37 degrees Celsius. As Daniel launched into his lecture, he noticed the students were far more engaged than he'd anticipated. The coffee incident had broken the ice in a way no planned icebreaker activity could have. Questions flowed freely, and even the shyest students seemed eager to learn more about this strange species that voluntarily drank hot, psychoactive substances for pleasure. When the class period ended, most students lingered, continuing to ask questions until the warning chime for the next session forced them to depart. Zix was the last to leave, pausing at the doorway. "Professor Lawson, would it be permissible for me to bring my specialized analysis equipment tomorrow? I would like to study your coffee more thoroughly from a safe distance, of course." "I'd be happy to help with your research, Zix," Daniel replied. "That's what cultural exchange is all about." After his students had left, Daniel sank into his chair, exhausted but exhilarated. His coffee had gone cold, but he drank it anyway, reflecting on how something as mundane as his morning beverage had turned into a valuable teaching moment. "Not bad for day one," he murmured to himself. The next morning, Daniel arrived early, carrying not only his usual travel mug but also a thermos with additional coffee. As he'd anticipated, Zix was already waiting outside the classroom, clutching what appeared to be a compact scientific analysis kit. "Good morning, Professor. I have prepared extensively for today's observation session," Zix announced, mandibles clicking with excitement. "I brought extra coffee," Daniel said, holding up the thermos. "I thought we might make this a proper demonstration for the whole class." Zix's large eyes seemed to shine brighter. "Most efficient. My clutchmates will be very impressed with my research." Other students began arriving, many of them buzzing with anticipation when they saw the scientific equipment Zix had brought. Word had apparently spread about yesterday's discovery. Once everyone was settled, Daniel placed his coffee mug on a special platform that Zix had set up, connected to various scanning devices and a holographic projector. "Today, before we continue with our formal curriculum, we're going to have a short scientific demonstration," Daniel announced. "Zix has kindly offered to analyze a common human beverage, coffee, and share the results with the class." Zix stepped forward, suddenly formal and professional. "The human consumption of coffee represents a fascinating intersection of biology, chemistry, and cultural practice. My analysis will focus on three aspects: temperature, chemical composition, and physiological effects." For the next 15 minutes, Zix conducted a surprisingly sophisticated analysis, projecting holographic molecular structures, temperature readings, and comparative biological data. The other students watched in fascination, as Zix explained how the caffeine molecule interacted with human neurochemistry. "The most remarkable aspect," Zix concluded, "is that this temperature, which would cause severe damage to most Zalaxian tissues, is considered pleasurable by humans. Their oral cavity and digestive tract contain specialized heat-resistant cells that can withstand temperatures up to approximately 80 degrees Celsius before suffering damage." "That's correct," Daniel confirmed, "though we definitely feel pain above certain temperatures. Coffee that's too hot can burn us. It's just that our too hot is different from yours." A tentacled student from the water tank raised an appendage. "Professor, in our cultural preparation materials, we learned that humans consume many substances that would be toxic to other species. Is this related to your heat resistance?" "That's an excellent question, Moral," Daniel replied. "Humans have evolved complex detoxification systems, particularly in our liver." He pointed to the organ on the holographic human display. which allows us to process substances that might be harmful to other species. This includes not just caffeine, but also compounds in foods like chocolate, which contains theobromine, toxic to several Earth species like dogs and cats. A gravelly voice spoke from the back of the room. Does this mean humans intentionally consume substances that are partially toxic as a show of biological superiority? Asked Grak, a silicon-based life form with rough, stone-like skin. Daniel shook his head. Not at all. These consumption patterns developed over thousands of years, through trial and error, cultural practices, and genetic adaptations. We don't drink coffee to prove we're tough, we drink it because we enjoy the taste and the effect. The same way your species absorbs specific mineral compounds for pleasure and nutritional value. Grak made a grinding sound that the translator interpreted as thoughtful acknowledgement. May we observe you consuming this beverage again? Asked a small, furry being with 6 eyes. Daniel nodded and picked up his mug. I'll narrate the experience this time, he said, then took a deliberate sip. The temperature feels pleasant warm but not painful. I can taste bitterness from the coffee beans with undertones of what we would describe as earthy or nutty flavors. The caffeine won't take effect immediately, but within about 20 minutes, I'll likely feel more alert and focused. The class watched in rapt attention. Several students made notes or recordings. Would it be permissible, Zix asked hesitantly, to measure your biological responses? Heart rate, neural activity, metabolic changes. Daniel considered this for a moment. I suppose that would be educational, as long as the monitoring is non-invasive. Zix quickly attached several small sensor pads to Daniel's wrist, temple, and neck. The holographic display shifted to show real-time biometric data, heart rate, blood pressure, estimated neural activity patterns, and core temperature. Fascinating, exclaimed Zix as the readings appeared. Your metabolic rate is already increasing slightly. And the neural activity in your frontal cortex shows enhanced patterns consistent with improved alertness. Daniel couldn't help but feel like a laboratory specimen, but the educational value was undeniable. The students were more engaged than he could have hoped for. Different humans have different tolerances and reactions to caffeine, Daniel explained. Some are very sensitive and limit their consumption. Others might drink several cups throughout the day, and there are no legal restrictions on this substance. Asked a tall, elegant being with bioluminescent patterns flowing across her skin. There are some age restrictions in certain Earth regions, Daniel clarified, and medical guidelines recommend limits, especially for people with certain health conditions. But generally, coffee is freely available and widely consumed across human societies. The discussion continued, branching into related topics like human dietary practices, the biological basis of taste preferences, and cultural rituals surrounding food and drink consumption. Before Daniel knew it, the class period was nearly over. This has been an excellent impromptu lesson, he said. For tomorrow, please review the materials on human sensory systems. We'll build on today's discoveries to better understand how humans perceive and interact with their environment. As the students filed out, Daniel noticed several of them speaking animatedly to peers from other classes in the hallway, some making drinking gestures and pointing back toward his classroom. He smiled to himself. His coffee habit had inadvertently become his most effective teaching tool. Over the next few days, Daniel's coffee continued to be a subject of intense interest. Other teachers from the academy began approaching him between classes, curious about the liquid fire that had caused such a stir among the students. I hear you've become something of a biological curiosity, remarked Professor Thala, a tall centurion who taught comparative anatomy. Her horse-like lower body shifted as she leaned against the wall of the teacher's lounge. Several of my students have requested we cover human temperature tolerance in greater detail. Daniel smiled, taking a sip from his ever-present mug. If I'd known coffee would be this effective at generating interest in human biology, I'd have led with it in my curriculum plan. The Academy director is pleased, Thala continued. Engagement metrics for your class are exceptionally high, but be prepared word has spread beyond the student body. What do you mean? Before Thala could answer, the door to the teacher's lounge slid open and an imposing figure entered. Standing nearly 7 feet tall, with sleek black exoskeleton and 4 arms, Administrator Vox was the highest-ranking Zalaxian on the station and the Academy's deputy director. Professor Lawson. Vox's translated voice was formal but not unfriendly. Your innovative demonstration of human biochemical resilience has generated significant interest. The Cultural Exchange Council has requested your participation in a special symposium. Daniel nearly choked on his coffee. A symposium about coffee. Not merely about the beverage, Vox clarified, but about human adaptive capabilities and their implications for interspecies interactions. Your coffee consumption has highlighted an important aspect of human physiology that many species find both alarming and fascinating. Thala nodded. Temperature tolerances are a major consideration in shared environments. Most station facilities are maintained at compromised settings that no species finds ideal but all can tolerate. Understanding the extremes each species can endure is crucial for safety protocols. Daniel set his mug down, suddenly aware of its significance beyond his personal caffeine habit. When would this symposium take place? 3 standard cycles from now, Vox replied. A formal invitation will be sent to your communication device. The Council requests that you prepare a comprehensive presentation on human temperature tolerance, with particular emphasis on oral and digestive capabilities. I'd be honored, Daniel said, slightly dazed by this unexpected turn of events. After Vox departed, Thala laughed softly. Congratulations, Professor Lawson. You've achieved academic recognition through the simple act of drinking your morning coffee. I'm not sure whether to be amused or embarrassed, Daniel admitted. Be neither, Thala advised. Cultural exchange works in unexpected ways. Sometimes the most ordinary aspects of one species' daily life provide the greatest insights for others. When Daniel returned to his classroom, he found Zix waiting outside, practically vibrating with excitement. Professor, I have been granted special research permission by the Academy Science Council. My coffee analysis project has been approved for expanded study. That's wonderful, Zix, Daniel said. But what exactly does expanded study entail? Zix's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of enthusiasm. With your permission, I would like to analyze different varieties of coffee, preparation methods, and consumption patterns. The Council believes this could provide valuable data on human biochemical adaptability. Daniel couldn't help but smile at the alien's enthusiasm. I'd be happy to help. In fact, I've just been invited to present at a Cultural Exchange Council symposium on this very topic. Zix's large eyes seemed to grow even wider. The Council Symposium, that is most prestigious. Many leading xenobiologists attend these events. The Zalaxian paused, then added hopefully, perhaps we could collaborate. My analysis could provide scientific support for your presentation. That sounds like an excellent idea, Daniel agreed. We could design a series of demonstrations showing how humans interact with different temperatures, not just in beverages but in food and environmental conditions too. Over the next few days, Daniel's classroom became an impromptu research lab. With Academy approval, Zix brought increasingly sophisticated analysis equipment, and other science-focused students joined the project. Daniel found himself brewing different types of coffee, explaining the differences between espresso, drip coffee, and cold brew, while Zix meticulously documented everything. The research expanded beyond coffee to include other hot beverages like tea and hot chocolate, as well as human foods served at various temperatures. Daniel even arranged for samples of ice cream to be shipped from Earth, demonstrating the opposite end of the temperature spectrum that humans could tolerate orally. Word continued to spread throughout the station. Researchers from other departments began stopping by Daniel's classroom during their free periods, curious to observe the experiments. Even non-teaching staff found excuses to pass by and peek in at the activity. One afternoon, as Daniel was demonstrating the preparation of particularly strong espresso, he noticed a small crowd had gathered at his classroom door. Among them was a striking figure he hadn't seen before, a tall, elegant being with luminescent skin that shifted through shades of blue and purple, and eyes that seemed to contain swirling galaxies. Zix noticed Daniel's distraction and turned to see what had caught his attention. Immediately, the Zalaxian straightened to a formal posture. "Ambassador Zoran," Zix acknowledged with a respectful gesture. "This is an unexpected honor." The luminous being inclined their heads slightly and entered the classroom. The other onlookers remained respectfully at the doorway. "Professor Lawson," the ambassador's voice was melodious, translated with perfect clarity. "I hope I am not interrupting your educational activities." "Not at all, Ambassador," Daniel replied, hiding his surprise. "We're just conducting some research on human consumption practices." "So I have heard," Zoran said, moving closer to observe the espresso machine. "News of your demonstrations has reached even the diplomatic concourse. The Galactic Council is quite interested in all aspects of human integration into interstellar society." Daniel felt a flutter of nervousness. "I'm just a teacher trying to help my students understand human biology and culture." "And therein lies the value." Zoran's skin rippled with patterns that suggested approval. "The most effective diplomacy begins with understanding seemingly small differences. May I observe this demonstration?" "Of course," Daniel nodded, turning back to the espresso machine. With the ambassador watching, he felt acutely aware of every movement as he finished brewing the espresso and poured it into a small cup. "This is espresso," he explained. "A concentrated form of coffee brewed under pressure. It's served at approximately 160 degrees Fahrenheit, about 71 Celsius. Zoran watched intently as Daniel took a sip of the hot, bitter liquid. "And this causes you no distress?" the ambassador asked. "None at all," Daniel confirmed. "In fact, the heat is part of the pleasure of the experience for humans." "Fascinating," Zoran murmured. "In my species, consumption is an ambient temperature process only. The concept of temperature as a component of gustatory pleasure is novel." Zix stepped forward, datapad in hand. "Ambassador, our research indicates that humans have evolved specialized heat-resistant tissues in their oral cavity and esophagus, allowing them to safely consume substances at temperatures that would cause tissue damage in many other species." "A remarkable adaptation," Zoran said, their eyes swirling with interest, "and one with significant implications for shared environments and diplomatic protocols." The ambassador turned back to Daniel. "Professor Lawson, I understand you will be presenting at the upcoming Cultural Exchange Symposium." "Yes, Ambassador. I shall make a point of attending," Zoran stated. The diplomatic corps would benefit from a deeper understanding of human physiological tolerances. It may help prevent misunderstandings in future interactions. After the ambassador departed, Zix turned to Daniel with what the human had learned to recognize as the Zalaxian expression of awe. "Professor, you realize the significance of this. Ambassador Zoran rarely attends academic functions. Their presence at your symposium will elevate its importance considerably." Daniel took another sip of his espresso, feeling slightly overwhelmed. "All this because I drink hot coffee." "Not merely because you drink it," Zix corrected, "but because you were willing to explain and demonstrate a biological capability that many species find both alarming and impressive. Cultural understanding begins with recognizing and respecting physiological differences." The day of the symposium arrived faster than Daniel expected. The Academy's largest lecture hall had been reserved for the event, and to Daniel's surprise, it was filled nearly to capacity. Academic staff, diplomatic personnel, and students from various departments had gathered to hear about human temperature tolerance. Standing backstage, Daniel took a deep breath, trying to calm his nerves. Beside him, Zix was making final adjustments to their demonstration equipment. "Everything is prepared, Professor," the Zalaxian reported. "The thermal imaging system is calibrated, and all samples are at the specified temperatures." "Thank you, Zix," Daniel said. "I couldn't have put this together without your help." The moderator, a respected xenobiologist named Dr. Laurel, approached them. "We're ready to begin, Professor Lawson." The audience includes representatives from 17 different species, including 3 Galactic Council members. Ambassador Zoran has indeed arrived, along with their diplomatic staff. Daniel nodded, smoothing down his formal attire, a human business suit that felt strangely out of place among the varied biological and mechanical body coverings of the station's inhabitants. "Remember," Dr. Laurel added, "many attendees have never directly observed human biological functions. What seems ordinary to you may be extraordinary to them." With those words echoing in his mind, Daniel walked onto the stage, followed by Zix wheeling their equipment cart. The audience quieted as Dr. Laurel introduced them, explaining how a simple classroom demonstration had evolved into a scientific investigation of interspecies differences. "Thank you all for coming," Daniel began, surveying the diverse audience. 3 weeks ago, I walked into my classroom carrying a cup of coffee, unaware that this routine human habit would be perceived as potentially dangerous by my students. That moment of cultural misunderstanding has led us to a deeper exploration of how species differ in their perception and tolerance of temperature extremes. For the next hour, Daniel and Zix presented their findings, demonstrating how humans could safely consume both hot and cold substances, explaining the biological adaptations that made this possible, and discussing the cultural significance of temperature in human cuisine. The highlight of the presentation came when Daniel demonstrated the temperature range by first drinking hot coffee, then immediately eating ice cream, while thermal imaging showed the temperature changes in his mouth and esophagus. "As you can see," Daniel explained, gesturing to the holographic display, "the human oral cavity can safely process substances ranging from near freezing to well above the boiling point of water on many habitable worlds. This adaptation allowed our ancestors to cook food, a practice that helped drive our species' cognitive evolution by increasing caloric intake and reducing pathogens." The audience was captivated, particularly when Zix presented comparative data showing how this temperature range compared to other species' tolerances. "This information has practical applications for interspecies environments," Zix explained. Shared dining facilities, for example, must account for these differences. What is pleasantly warm for a human might be dangerously hot for a Zalaxian, while what feels refreshingly cool to a Centaurian might cause painful cold stress in a Thermian. When they opened the floor for questions, dozens of appendages, tentacles, and light signals went up around the room. The questions ranged from practical concerns about safety protocols to more philosophical inquiries about how temperature tolerance shaped human culture and psychology. Ambassador Zoran posed the final question, rising gracefully from their seat near the front. Professor Lawson, your demonstration has illuminated an aspect of human physiology that many of us had not fully appreciated. In your view, what other ordinary human capabilities might we be overlooking that could have significance for interspecies relations? Daniel considered this thoughtfully. That's an excellent question, Ambassador. Humans tend to take our adaptations for granted: our endurance, our omnivorous diet, our circadian flexibility. I believe there's tremendous value in these cross-species conversations precisely because they help us recognize and appreciate differences that might otherwise lead to misunderstanding. As the symposium concluded, Daniel found himself surrounded by attendees eager to continue the discussion. What had begun as a startled exclamation from a student, "You're consuming liquid fire," had evolved into a meaningful exchange of scientific and cultural knowledge. Later that evening, Daniel sat in the observation lounge, a fresh cup of coffee in his hands, looking out at the stars. The door slid open and Zix entered, carrying what appeared to be an insulated container. "Professor, may I join you?" "Of course, Zix," Daniel smiled. "And after all we've been through, I think you can call me Daniel when we're not in class." The Zalaxian settled onto a specially designed seat. "I have been authorized to share something with you," Zix said, opening the container. Inside was a small vial of glowing blue liquid. "This is Zalaxian thermal nectar, a traditional beverage from my homeworld." "It's beautiful," Daniel said, leaning closer to observe it. "It is served at precisely 12 degrees Celsius, what humans would consider quite cool. For my species, this represents the upper limit of comfortable consumption temperature." Zix carefully poured a small amount into a specialized container. "It would be an honor if you would observe me consuming my culture's traditional beverage, as I have observed you with yours." Daniel watched as Zix delicately sipped the luminous liquid using a specialized feeding apparatus. "How does it taste?" Daniel asked. "In Zalaxian terms, it has notes of mineral richness and floral complexity," Zix explained. "The closest human comparison might be a very mild honey with traces of citrus." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, each with their culturally distinct beverage, looking out at the vast expanse of space. "You know," Daniel said reflectively, "when I applied to teach at the academy, I never imagined my coffee habit would become a diplomatic talking point. And I never imagined I would become a research specialist in human temperature tolerance," Zix replied. "Yet here we are." "Here we are indeed," Daniel agreed, raising his mug in a toast, "to unexpected lessons and new understandings." Zix raised his container in return, "to coffee and thermal nectar and the beings who consume them." As they looked out at the stars, Daniel reflected on how something as simple as a hot beverage had created a bridge between worlds. Tomorrow would bring new classes, new questions, and undoubtedly new misunderstandings to resolve. But for now, he was content to enjoy his coffee, the company of his alien friend, and the knowledge that even the most ordinary human habits could open extraordinary conversations across the stars. In the weeks that followed, Daniel's coffee curriculum became an official part of the Academy's Human Studies program. Other human teachers began incorporating similar practical demonstrations of everyday human activities, helping alien students understand not just the biological facts of humanity, but the lived experience. The Cultural Exchange Council published Zix's research findings in their quarterly journal, earning the student considerable recognition in academic circles. Several engineering departments across the station began developing new adaptive environmental controls based on the temperature tolerance data, improving comfort for all species in shared spaces. As for Daniel, he continued his morning coffee ritual, now with a deeper appreciation for how something so ordinary in his life could seem so extraordinary through alien eyes. Each day brought new questions, new misunderstandings to clear up, and new opportunities to build bridges between worlds, one cup of liquid fire at a time. And sometimes, when the teaching day was done, he would meet Zix in the observation lounge, where they would share their respective beverages and conversation, two beings from different worlds finding common ground in their differences. In those quiet moments, with Earth visible in the distance and the vastness of space stretching before them, Daniel would reflect on how far humanity had come and how much further they could go with open minds and mutual respect. The universe, it seemed, was full of wonders both great and small. And sometimes, the smallest things like a human casually drinking hot coffee could open the greatest doors to understanding.